Let me tell you something that's reshaping America right now. While everyone has been focused on Texas and Florida as the escape routes for wealthy Californians and New Yorkers, there's a much bigger story unfolding. The narrative you've heard? It's only half true. Yes, Florida gained over 2,000 wealthy young households earning over $200,000 in 2022 alone. Texas saw similar numbers. But here's what nobody's telling you. The exodus isn't just about those two states anymore. The migration map has exploded into a dozen new destinations that most people have never even considered. Between 2020 and 2024, California lost nearly 240,000 residents through domestic migration. New York hemorrhaged over 120,000 people in 2024 alone. That's not just people leaving, that's entire communities, neighborhoods worth of wealth, ambition, and purchasing power vanishing from these states. But where are they really going? Sure, Florida leads the pack, but Tennessee added 48,000 new residents through net migration in 2024. North Carolina brought in over 82,000. South Carolina welcomed 68,000. These aren't small numbers. These are entire small cities worth of people relocating in a single year. Here's what I find fascinating, and this is purely my opinion. We're witnessing the first truly distributed wealth migration in American history. In previous decades, money moved from one major metro to another, New York to Los Angeles, Chicago to Phoenix. But today, wealth is scattering across mid-sized cities that most coastal elites couldn't find on a map 5 years ago. Take Idaho. This state that's home to just under 2 million people saw nearly 27,000 Californians arrive in 2022 alone. That's a population increase of over 1% from just one state in 1 year. Boise, a city that was sleepy and affordable, suddenly became one of the hottest real estate markets in America. But it's not just Californians. The data shows that wealthy young professionals, those aged 26 to 35 earning over $200,000, are choosing Tennessee, both Carolinas and Arizona, at rates nobody predicted. In 2022, Tennessee netted over 340 wealthy young households. North Carolina brought in 521. These are the people who build companies, create jobs, and transform local economies. Arizona tells an incredible story. Phoenix added approximately 80,000 residents in 2024, many from California, Illinois, and New York. The median home price now sits around $413,000, expensive for locals, but still 70% cheaper than what these newcomers sold in Los Angeles or San Francisco. And here's something that really stands out to me. This isn't just about taxes, though that's certainly part of it. Among taxpayers earning over $200,000, the pattern is clear. They're leaving high-tax states like California, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts for low-tax or no-income tax states. But dig deeper into the data, and you see something more complex. Remote work revolutionized everything. During the pandemic, people realized they could earn San Francisco salaries while living in Charleston or Nashville or Boise. That arbitrage, earning coastal money while spending heartland prices, created a new American dream for the laptop class. The numbers are staggering. Between 2021 and 2022, Florida gained over $36 billion in adjusted gross income from incoming residents. Texas brought in over $10 billion. North Carolina, Arizona, Tennessee, and South Carolina each added around $4 billion in AGI. That's not just people, that's economic firepower. Meanwhile, California lost nearly $24 billion in AGI. New York dropped $14 billion. Illinois shed almost $10 billion. These aren't just statistics. They represent tax revenue, consumer spending, real estate transactions, and economic velocity disappearing from these states. What makes this migration unique is its diversity. It's not just retirees fleeing to Florida, though they're certainly part of it. It's tech workers heading to Austin, finance professionals relocating to Nashville, entrepreneurs building companies in Greenville, South Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. In my opinion, what we're seeing is the death of the old model where you had to be in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles to succeed. That model required you to pay $7,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, sit in traffic for 2 hours a day, and accept that you'd never own a house. The pandemic shattered that illusion, and people realized, why am I doing this? The states winning this migration war share common characteristics. Lower taxes, yes, but also lower regulations, faster permitting for new construction, more land for development, and state governments that actually want growth. It's no coincidence that the top gaining states are almost all in the South and Mountain West. But here's where it gets interesting and controversial. This isn't a one-way ticket to paradise. These migrating masses are bringing problems with them. Housing prices in Boise doubled in just a few years. Nashville's cost of living has skyrocketed. Charleston went from affordable charm to coastal price luxury. The very affordability that attracted people is being destroyed by their arrival. And that's creating something America hasn't seen in generations. Native residents who are furious. Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Idaho, Arizona. 5 years ago, these weren't on anyone's list of hot destinations for wealthy Americans. Today, they're the new promised land. Let me break down what's happening in each of these states, because the transformation is remarkable. Tennessee is adding residents at a pace that would shock most people. Between 2020 and 2024, the state gained over 76,000 residents through net domestic migration. But here's what's really interesting. After hitting a peak of 83,000 in 2022, that number has been tapering off. It's still positive, still strong, but the gold rush phase might be ending. Nashville has become ground zero for this transformation. The metro area, which includes Murfreesboro and Franklin, increased by over 136,000 people from 2020 to 2024, a gain of about 6.4%. For context, the U.S. overall grew by 2.6% during the same period. But here's something that surprised me when I dug into the data. Nearly 38,000 of Nashville's new residents came from other countries, accounting for about 28% of the region's total growth. This isn't just wealthy Americans fleeing California, it's global migration patterns shifting. The appeal is obvious. Tennessee has no state income tax. Nashville has a booming music industry, healthcare sector, and increasingly, a tech scene. The median home price is still far below coastal cities. You can live well, raise a family, and actually save money. North Carolina is experiencing something even more dramatic. The state netted over 82,000 residents in 2024, making it the second highest gainer after Texas. Since 2020, North Carolina has brought in over 126,000 people through net migration. Charlotte has become a financial powerhouse, rivaling cities 10 times its age. The city offers lower living costs, great weather, and access to both mountains and beaches within a few hours' drive. Raleigh is known for its southern charm, highly ranked school districts, and low crime rates in many suburbs. The Research Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, has become a magnet for educated professionals. But here's what really stands out. North Carolina is gaining wealthy residents from New York in huge numbers. The state saw a net gain of over 9,000 New Yorkers between recent migration periods. When you combine that with the influx from California and Florida retirees moving inland, you get a state that's transforming rapidly. South Carolina is the dark horse that nobody saw coming. In 2024, it had a net migration rate of 51.7%, according to U-Haul data, meaning for every person who moved out, more than 1.5 people moved in. That's extraordinary. Charleston has become one of the most desirable small cities in America. The median home price hit over $610,000 in 2024, up nearly 10% year over year. For a city that was affordable and charming just 5 years ago, that's a seismic shift. Greenville, South Carolina has emerged as a fast-growing city with a thriving job market. It's attracting people who want a down-to-earth community culture, mild year-round weather, and access to outdoor activities. The cost of living is still reasonable, for now, and the job market is strong. But in my opinion, South Carolina is about to learn a hard lesson. When you welcome this much wealth this quickly, you create affordability problems that can devastate long-time residents. We're already seeing it in Charleston, where service workers and teachers can barely afford to live in the city they serve. Idaho represents perhaps the most extreme transformation. The state's population grew nearly 7% from 2020 to 2023, well above the national growth rate. Most of that growth came from domestic migration, with Californians accounting for roughly 31% of Idaho's population increase. Boise led the nation in rent increases during one period, with median rents topping $1,000. The median home price more than doubled over a decade to $392,000 in 2020, and it's only climbed higher since then. By 2024, the median home price in Idaho sat around $480,000. Here's something fascinating. Of the 88,000 people who moved to Idaho between 2021 and 2022, 56.5% came from California, Washington, or Oregon. These are blue state refugees seeking red state policies, lower costs, and what they perceive as a better quality of life. But, and this is important, while Californians get all the blame, the real story is more complex. More people move to Ada County, where Boise sits, from other Idaho counties than from California during some measured periods. The California narrative is real, but it's also somewhat overblown. Arizona rounds out our list of surprise winners. The Phoenix metro area added 80,000 residents in 2024. Over 10,000 people searched for Arizona homes from New York, California, and Illinois during the winter moving season of 2024-2025. The attraction is clear: robust job market, affordable living compared to coastal cities, and that endless sunshine. Major employers like Intel, TSMC, Banner Health, and Arizona State University provide economic stability. The median home price of $413,000 sounds expensive until you compare it to California's $600,000 plus median. But here's what troubles me, and this is just my opinion. Arizona is facing challenges that could limit future growth. Water shortages are real. Regulators are already pushing back against new development around Phoenix and Reno, unless water can be sourced elsewhere. The summers are brutally hot and getting hotter due to climate change. What connects all these states? They're business-friendly, with lower taxes and fewer regulations. They have state governments that actively want growth rather than fighting it. They offer a perceived better quality of life, more space, less congestion, lower crime in many areas, and access to nature. But they're also experiencing growing pains that would shock most people. Housing inventory can't keep up with demand. Infrastructure is straining, schools are overcrowded, traffic is worsening, and most critically, the locals are getting angry. Here's where the story gets dark. The wealthy migration that was supposed to bring prosperity to these destination states is instead creating a housing affordability crisis that's devastating longtime residents. Let me give you some numbers that should alarm everyone. In Boise, Idaho, the median home price shot up more than 17% in just 1 year during the height of migration. Homes that cost $200,000 in 2015 were selling for $400,000 or more by 2020. Today, the median sits around $475,000 to $480,000. But here's what makes this particularly painful. Locals aren't getting corresponding wage increases. Idaho has lower average salaries than 29 other states. The median household income can't support these new housing prices. What's affordable to a California software engineer earning $150,000 is catastrophically expensive to an Idaho teacher earning $50,000. Nashville tells a similar story. The city's housing costs have surged as over 72,000 people moved in from other states since 2020. Rents have climbed, home prices have appreciated rapidly, and suddenly, the affordable Nashville that attracted people in the first place is disappearing. Charleston, South Carolina, might be the most extreme example. The median sales price for single-family homes reached $610,000 in 2024, up nearly 10% year over year. In Mount Pleasant, just outside Charleston, the median hit $910,000, up nearly 14%. Think about that for a moment. A city that was known for southern charm and affordability now has median home prices approaching those of major coastal metros. Local teachers, nurses, police officers, firefighters, the people who make a city function, simply cannot afford to live there anymore. In my opinion, what we're witnessing is the Californication of America. California's housing crisis wasn't created overnight. It was the result of decades of restrictive zoning, NIMBY politics, and wealthy homeowners blocking new construction to protect their property values. Now, wealthy Californians fleeing that crisis are recreating it everywhere they go. Arizona residents feel this acutely. A recent poll found that 28% of registered voters have seriously considered leaving Arizona due to housing prices. Only 13% said housing in Arizona is affordable. A study from Arizona State University found it takes a salary of $123,752 to afford the median home price in Phoenix, out of reach for middle-class workers like nurses, teachers, and construction workers. Idaho's situation might be the most dire. From 2019 to 2023, median home prices in Boise increased by over $50,000. Housing inventory collapsed from over 3,000 homes for sale in Ada County in May 2006 to just 300 in February 2020. When you have that few homes available and thousands of buyers with California money, prices explode. The rental market isn't any better. Boise led the nation in rent increases during one measured period. Median rents topped $1,000, then kept climbing. For a state where median household incomes are below the national average, this creates real hardship. Here's something I find particularly troubling. The data shows that incoming homebuyers shop for homes in Boise with an average budget of $738,000, while locals average under $500,000. That's not just a gap, that's an unbridgeable chasm. North Carolina and South Carolina are experiencing similar pressures. In Charleston, housing costs increased 7.1% from 2023 to 2024. South Carolinians now carry an average of $1.64 in debt for every dollar they earn. Housing prices are projected to soar by nearly 49% from 2021 to 2024 in the state. The data suggests that a single person in South Carolina needs to earn around $88,317 a year to maintain a good standard of living. For a family of three, that number jumps to $200,762 annually. Those aren't entry-level numbers, those are senior professional incomes. What's happening is a form of economic displacement that America hasn't seen since perhaps the Dust Bowl migrations. Longtime residents who have roots in these communities, whose families have been there for generations, are being priced out by newcomers with larger bank accounts. Here's the cruel irony. Many of these newcomers left California or New York precisely because they were being priced out. They sold their homes for huge profits and moved to affordable states, not recognizing that their purchasing power, inflated by coastal real estate values, would price out locals in their new homes. And it's not just home prices. When wealthy people move into an area, everything becomes more expensive. Restaurants raise their prices, grocery stores adjust to the new demographic, property taxes increase as home values rise. Local governments see the tax revenue and get addicted to growth, approving more luxury developments instead of affordable housing. The people who suffer most are those who can least afford it. Service workers who staff the restaurants these newcomers want to visit. Teachers who educate their children. Nurses who staff hospitals. Police officers and firefighters who keep communities safe. These essential workers are being pushed further and further from their workplaces, facing longer commutes and higher costs. Some cities are recognizing this crisis. California cities are building subsidized teacher housing because teachers literally cannot afford to live near their schools. Baltimore converted an 86,000 square foot historic building into teacher apartments ranging from $700 to $1,200 per month. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati converted an old church into affordable teacher housing. Think about that. In 2024, we need to create special housing for teachers, professionals with college degrees, because the market has failed them so completely. In Arizona, over 1 in 4 residents are considering leaving due to housing costs. State lawmakers rushed through the Starter Homes Act, attempting to reduce local regulations that slow housing construction. The bill passed the Senate 16-13 with bipartisan support because the crisis is that severe. But here's what I believe is the core problem, and this is just my opinion. We're not building enough housing, and the housing we are building is the wrong kind. Developers chase luxury buyers because the margins are better. Local governments approve high-end developments because they generate more tax revenue. Meanwhile, the starter homes, the modest apartments, the workforce housing that communities desperately need simply doesn't get built. Idaho saw this clearly. Housing inventory collapsed while population surged. You can't accommodate 50,000 new residents a year when you're only building a few thousand homes. The math doesn't work. Now we get to the part that nobody wants to talk about publicly, but everyone discusses privately. The locals are furious. In Boise, Idaho, vandals spray-painted, "Go back to Cali" on freeway barriers. Someone put up a massive sign saying, "Go home, California," with explicit language. The last Boise mayoral election cycle became what observers called a referendum on growth and housing, and included a fringe candidate who literally campaigned on keeping Californians out. Let me be clear about something, and this is my opinion. This anger is completely understandable. Imagine you've lived in Boise your entire life. You remember when you could buy a house on a modest income, when traffic was manageable, when you knew your neighbors, when the culture felt cohesive. Then, in just 5 years, everything changes. Housing prices double. Your property taxes skyrocket. Traffic becomes unbearable. Your favorite local restaurants close, replaced by expensive bistros you can't afford. Your kids' schools are overcrowded with children whose parents can outbid you for homes in good districts. And everywhere you look, you see California license plates. A study by Boise State University's School of Public Service looked at the political impact of California transplants. The findings surprised even researchers. Californians moving to Idaho as a group look like native Idahoans politically. They tend to be more Republican than Democratic, just like the locals. But that doesn't matter to angry natives. The cultural resentment runs deeper than politics. One Boise resident rattled off grievances with practiced ease. "They're driving up housing costs. They're bringing liberal values to Idaho, taking over our farmlands to build developments." Even when the data doesn't support all these claims, the feeling is real. Here's something I find particularly interesting. A California transplant who moved to Idaho in 2014 left a review offering advice to other Californians. His key point? Stop talking about California. Stop comparing everything to California. Stop complaining about what Idaho lacks compared to California. Because every time you do that, you're telling locals their home isn't good enough. Charleston, South Carolina, is experiencing similar tensions, though perhaps more politely expressed. It's the South, after all. Local residents watch as their historic city transforms into a playground for wealthy transplants. The charm that made Charleston special, the affordable beach access, the walkable neighborhoods, the tight-knit community, is being priced away. Longtime Charleston residents see newcomers from places like Washington, D.C., New York City, and Atlanta driving up home prices and bringing different expectations. When the median home price jumps from $400,000 to $610,000 in just a few years, locals who hope to buy their first home find themselves permanently locked out. In my opinion, what's creating the most resentment isn't just economic, it's cultural. These communities had identities, traditions, ways of life that existed for generations. Then wealthy outsiders arrive and immediately want to change things to match where they came from. Nashville locals watch as their city becomes Nash Vegas, overrun with bachelorette parties and transplants. The music city that nurtured countless struggling artists now has rents that drive those same artists to other states. The honky-tonks downtown increasingly cater to tourists and transplants rather than locals. Arizona residents express frustration that's more subtle but equally real. They watch as tech workers from California and New York bid up home prices, often paying cash from the sale of expensive coastal properties. Local families who've saved for years to buy a home find themselves outbid by buyers who can pay tens of thousands over asking price without blinking. Here's something the data reveals that's important. Locals are often wrong about who's moving in. In Boise, for example, more people moved from other Idaho counties than from California during some periods. But Californians are visible, identifiable, and make convenient scapegoats for complex problems. But I'll be honest, this is my personal opinion. Sometimes the resentment is entirely justified. When wealthy newcomers move in and immediately start lobbying local government to change zoning laws, block affordable housing, increase regulations, and generally recreate the political environment they supposedly fled, locals have every right to be angry. There's a term for this: California refugees or Bay Area carpetbaggers. People leave California because of high taxes, overregulation, homelessness, crime, and quality of life issues. Then they arrive in Idaho, Arizona, or Tennessee and vote for the exact policies that created those problems in California. A local Idaho resident summed it up perfectly. "We don't mind people moving here. We mind people moving here and trying to make it like where they left." The economic resentment is even more visceral. Redfin data showed that incoming buyers in Boise had average budgets of $738,000, while locals averaged under $500,000. That's not just a difference. That's locals being structurally priced out of their own housing market by outsiders with inflated wealth from coastal real estate bubbles. Service workers feel this most acutely. The barista serving $5 lattes to wealthy transplants can't afford rent in the same city. The construction worker building luxury homes for newcomers gets pushed further into exurbs with brutal commutes. The nurse working at the local hospital faces a choice: spend half your income on rent or commute 2 hours each way. What makes this particularly bitter is that wealthy migrants often don't realize they're the problem. They think they're escaping high costs and finding freedom in a new state. They don't recognize that their purchasing power, earned in expensive markets with inflated salaries, is devastating to local economies built on lower wage scales. I've read forum posts from transplants complaining about entitled locals who resent them, completely oblivious to how their presence has destroyed housing affordability. They paid only $400,000 for a house and feel like they got a deal, not recognizing that locals earning $50,000 a year used to be able to buy that same house for $200,000 just 5 years earlier. The tension even spawns merchandise. Idaho has a cottage industry of shirts and stickers based on a 1980s video game showing California, Nevada, Utah, and Washington as an invading force that Idaho must defend against. It's played as humor, but there's real anger underneath. Some newcomers get it. The California transplant who moved to Boise in 2014 wrote in a review, "Don't move to Idaho if you're not willing to embrace Idaho culture. Don't move here expecting to change it into California." But many don't get it, or don't care. So where does this leave us? What does this great wealthy migration mean for America's future? Let me give you my take, and I'll be honest. I'm conflicted about this. On one hand, this migration represents something fundamentally American. People voting with their feet, seeking better opportunities, pursuing their version of the American dream. The data clearly shows that people are fleeing high tax, high regulation, expensive states for places that offer more freedom and affordability. That's the market working. California lost nearly $24 billion in adjusted gross income between 2021 and 2022. New York dropped $14 billion. Illinois shed almost $10 billion. That's not just numbers. That's a referendum on failed policies. When people can work remotely and choose where to live, they're choosing against states with failing schools, rising crime, deteriorating infrastructure, and governments that seem more interested in ideology than results. The winning states, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Arizona, Idaho, are gaining not just people, but economic vitality. They're attracting entrepreneurs who build companies, investors who fund startups, talented professionals who drive innovation. That's good for those states and potentially good for America overall. But, and this is a huge but, this migration is also creating a crisis that could define the next generation. We're seeing the Californication of America happening in real time. The same problems that destroyed housing affordability in California are now spreading to places that were supposed to be the escape hatches. Here's what I find most troubling. We're creating a two-tier America. There's the mobile professional class that can work remotely, earn high incomes, and move wherever they want. Then there's everyone else. The teachers, nurses, service workers, tradespeople, who are increasingly priced out of the communities they serve. The data on teacher housing tells this story brutally. Cities across America are building special subsidized housing for teachers because market rate housing is now beyond their reach. Think about that. We're at a point where college-educated professionals with stable jobs cannot afford to live in many American cities without subsidies. That's not a functioning housing market. That's a crisis. In my opinion, What we're witnessing is the death of the middle-class American dream in large swaths of the country. The ability to buy a modest home on a modest income, raise a family, and build wealth over time. That's becoming impossible in more and more places. The migration numbers tell us something important. Between 2020 and 2024, the South gained nearly 4 million people through net domestic migration. The West lost population. The Northeast lost population. The Midwest was roughly flat. This isn't a temporary pandemic-era anomaly. This is a fundamental restructuring of where Americans live and work. But here's what concerns me. The South and Mountain West states that are gaining all these people are making the same mistakes that California made. They're not building enough housing. They're not investing in infrastructure. They're not planning for sustainable growth. They're just celebrating the tax revenue and letting the free market sort it out. Except the free market isn't sorting it out. Idaho is a perfect example. The state celebrated being the fastest growing in America, but it didn't build anywhere near enough housing to accommodate that growth. Housing inventory collapsed. Prices exploded. And now locals are furious while the state scrambles to respond. Arizona is facing water shortages that could limit future development. North Carolina is seeing traffic congestion that rivals anywhere in America. Nashville's infrastructure is straining under population growth. Charleston is losing its character to development. These are the predictable consequences of unplanned, unsustainable growth. Here's what I think needs to happen, and this is purely my opinion. We need a national conversation about housing policy that goes beyond build more houses. We need to think about what kind of communities we want, who they're for, and how to preserve affordability while allowing growth. That means reforming zoning laws to allow more diverse housing types. It means building transit so people don't need to drive everywhere. It means investing in infrastructure before growth, rather than chasing it. It means recognizing that housing is both a commodity and a human necessity, and the market alone won't solve this. Some states are trying. Arizona passed legislation to reduce local regulations that slow housing construction. Tennessee is investing in workforce housing. North Carolina is trying to balance growth with preservation. But it's not enough, and it's not fast enough. The data suggests this migration will continue. Climate change makes Sunbelt states attractive year-round. Remote work is here to stay for many professionals. The tax advantages of low-tax states remain powerful. The quality of life benefits, space, nature, community, continue to draw people. But unless destination states dramatically change their approach, they'll simply recreate the problems people are fleeing. Boise will become as expensive as San Francisco. Nashville will have Los Angeles traffic. Phoenix will face the same affordability crisis as San Diego. And then where do people go? There's no more frontier. The ultra-wealthy will be fine. They always are. They'll buy their compounds in Jackson Hole or Flathead Lake or wherever the next exclusive enclave emerges. But the professional class, the middle class, the working class, they're running out of places to run to. What gives me some hope is that Americans are adaptable. We've solved housing crises before. After World War II, we built millions of homes to accommodate returning veterans. We created suburbs, developed new construction techniques, invested in infrastructure. We can do it again, if we choose to. But here's the reality check. It requires political will that I'm not sure exists. Local homeowners oppose new construction because it might lower their property values. NIMBYs block everything from apartments to townhomes. Wealthy residents who just arrived pull up the ladder behind them. Everyone wants housing to be affordable, but nobody wants it built near them. The great wealthy migration of the 2020s will be studied by historians as a pivotal moment. Either it marks the beginning of a renewal, a geographic rebalancing that brings prosperity to new regions while forcing failing states to reform, or it marks the expansion of inequality, where even the refugee states become unaffordable and America becomes a nation of haves and have-nots divided by geography. I know which outcome I hope for. But the data suggests we're heading toward the latter unless something changes dramatically. The question is, will we choose to change, or will we let the market run its course until there's nowhere affordable left to go? That's the real story of where the rich are moving. It's not just Texas and Florida. It's a dozen states experiencing transformation. And the choices they make in the next few years will determine whether this migration creates opportunity or simply spreads California's problems across America. We're about to find out.